Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another Toy Paradise. Welcome back to another mailbox. He is finally here. The GI Joe Classified that I have been waiting for about 2 weeks. I am literally so excited. Because, I mean, who wouldn't be? I finally got him. And to give him a little quote, kneel before your emperors, vipers. This I command. GI Joe Classified Serpentor. First, look at this box. It's literally pretty damn thick. So it is number 57. I believe Mindbenders was about this big. Cobra symbol on top. Same thing on this side, 57. Can't really see it, but there is the same thing on both sides. The bottom, the back art is amazing. This was taken directly from one of the comics. This is Serpentor sitting on Abe Lincoln at the Washington Monument Memorial, directly from the cartoon. We have a Serpentor figure. Serpentor with the Baroness, Destro, and a whole bunch of troops. You can barely see it, but there's Serpentor literally choking Cobra Commander, and the bottom is Serpentor with all of the Cobra air vehicles flying out of the temple. Now, it is like the Mindbender box where it comes with a sleeve. I already opened what I could from the box. So the flaps aren't really sticking to it, but when it first comes, the sleeve, the flaps, as well as the character inside are all taped to the box. And if you can see, I did a little damage to the box, taking off the tape, but that's alright. Basically the same on this side. This side, however, is the Cobra DNA symbol. Basically this. Mindbender also had this, which is pretty fabulous. You open it up, and there's the 3 weapons for Serpentor, Serpentor himself, another crown, I guess, or backing for him, another snake helmet. Not sure why you have 2. And this is his gauntlet for his hands. Now it already comes with a back, comes with a cape. And I actually tried to open it up and see what's inside. But it really wasn't coming up at first. So there is the inside here is just a small drawing for where the figure is supposed to be. And if you go inside here, it's the same drawing as this. There is a Mars symbol right here. For those that don't know, Mars is, of course, Destro's business, which is legalize making weapons, but illegally. Now everything is still kind of wrapped into it, but it's a better look at him. Feel like I gotta sneeze. This is the Air Chariot, and of course the snake God bless me. Snake head that's on the shield, and you can see how big the chariot is. It's God bless me. This is almost as big as my hand. The stabilizers, the handlebars, and right up here is Serpentor's pet snake. Not sure if you can. There you go. And I'm not sure what this is. Feels like more weapons. Probably the 2 machine guns that's supposed to be on the chariot. So yeah, you take the chariot, put in the handlebars, the shield, the stabilizers, and the 2 huge machine guns. I've never seen a classified come with instructions, but to be fair, this is one of the first classified figures I've got that is a vehicle. And there is another paper. I'm guessing this is probably the warning. Literally small pieces, you know. So the Air Chariot itself already has the stickers applied. So does the handlebars. I'm not sure if you can see it. Yeah, a little bit. There looks like a gauge on the handlebars. Now, if I remember correctly, the toy was a lot more gold. It looks like a dull gold, but then the scales on the shield is actually gold. It's a brighter gold. So, yes, I am insanely happy with this figure. Oh, the one thing I was told, though, is this. His left arm can break pretty easily if you, I guess, bend it too far. So if you plan on getting the figure, please be careful of that. So, remember a couple videos ago I told you with Serpentor I had problems, not with, well, yes, with the left arm easily breaking is a problem, but I meant the character itself. I loved the idea that they came up with, the whole DNA process. I loved creating an emperor for Cobra. Although I am more a Cobra Commander fan than I am a Serpentor fan. However, my biggest problems was that as smart as Mindbender was, if you think about it, he made 3 mistakes. So first off, every one of the DNA for Serpentor that they used were conquerors, world leaders. They were, I mean, don't get me wrong, they were great. However, each one failed at some point. If you're going to create an emperor, wouldn't you want the DNA from people that didn't fail? I mean, Genghis Khan, they put up a wall to stop the Khans. Things like that. Also, the other big thing is they lost the DNA, so they needed to use Sergeant Slaughter's. No disrespect to Sergeant Slaughter, the wrestler. I always found his character to be awesome, especially when he turned heel. But Sergeant Slaughter, the cartoon character, was a drill sergeant, was tough as nails, was a great fighter, but he still was a GI Joe. He still had honor. He still had discipline. He had all the things that you definitely need as an emperor, but that would make him a good guy. And the third biggest thing about the whole DNA thing is that I've always had a problem with is each of these DNA world leaders, conquerors, almost all of them had a huge ego. Combining the DNA would create a character like Serpentor, who literally had the biggest ego in Cobra. You know, the whole "this I command" thing. It's mind-boggling that Mindbender didn't really think more of this process. I mean, I loved the character. He was great. He made me laugh. It was entertaining. But at the same time, yes, G.I. Joe had to win, so the character had to lose. But still, it's mind-boggling. Especially since the whole idea from the cartoon came from Globulus and Cobra La. And that in itself is a whole another... What? the I like the way they did the comics. If I remember correctly, one of the DNA that they used was Storm Shadow's, and that's how Storm Shadow had died in the comic books, and that's how they brought him back to life. Was the same way they brought Serpentor back, or created Serpentor. I think the comics was a little bit darker in the way they created Serpentor. They never did do Sergeant Slaughter's DNA. And I think it was almost all the same DNA that they did in the cartoons. And in the comic book, Serpentor never said, "This I command." So it was more of a... less of an ego with the comic book version of Serpentor. You saw the majestic, you saw the power. In the comic book, or in the cartoon, it was more of a comedy act. You saw the power, but you also saw it wasn't going to be as, or going the way it was supposed to. In the comic book, I mean, a lot of the comic book was dark. So in the cartoon, Cobra Commander, because of Cobra La, was turned into a snake. In season 3, he was brought back to almost human form, and he turned Serpentor into an iguana. In the comic book, Serpentor had taken over Cobra Island. Cobra Commander had retired. He had a son named Billy that Zartan kind of took over and trained, and then left. Billy found out who Zartan was and left him and joined GI Joe. But Cobra Commander and Destro in the comic book decided to leave Cobra. And it was then that Destro started creating the Iron Grenadiers and his army. He went back to Scotland to his roots, to his castle, Castle Destro, and wanted to form his own army, which in a way was... The cartoon brought them together weirdly. In the comic, it was then explained that it was more of a business partnership. Destro didn't really want anything to do with Cobra. So, with Cobra Commander gone, Serpentor Rude, one of the Crimson Guard of most of the guards, Crimson Guards, was actually clones in the comic book. And I think it was Fred 5. Yeah, a lot of them were clones of a guy named Fred. So Fred 5 took over. Well, Fred 5 met Raptor and Crystal Ball and found the Cobra Commander battle armor, which is where he came into the comics. Before that, Cobra Commander never had it. Didn't. It was a stupid idea. So Fred posed as Cobra Commander, came back, and started I wouldn't say a revolution, but it started a huge Cobra civil war. One side was Serpentor, the other side was Fred. Serpentor had the Crimson Twins and a few other people. I believe Scrap Iron, Firefly, Major Blood, maybe? I can't remember. Baroness left to find Destro. Fred had Raptor, Crystal Ball, and a few others. And they went at war. With Fred trying to take over the entire Cobra rulership. GI Joe came in to try to stop the war, especially stop it from spreading to other countries. So what happened is Cobra Commander came back, killed Serpentor, buried everybody that was on Serpentor's team, and gave Fred a choice of whether you can follow me or you can leave. Raptor and Crystal Ball pledged their allegiance to the commander. The Cobra Commander battle armor was never ever seen after that. It was just Cobra Commander as we know it. I mean, that is the difference between the comics and the cartoon. Well, Billy came back, joined GI Joe, joined Storm Shadow, joined Snake Eyes. For me, I will always love the GI Joe comic books over the cartoon. Strangely enough, I will always love the Transformers cartoons over the comic books. So the original 4 comic books for Transformers was published by Marvel, and it was only supposed to be 4 comic books. The guy who created it for Marvel decided to leave, and he took Transformers and kept making Transformers comic books. Unfortunately, the Transformers comic books was a huge mess. To start off with, the main character was not Spike. Sparkplug was there, but it was Spike's cousin that was the main character. And I believe it was Sam. So you can see where the live action movie got Sam from. Sam Witwicky was the original protagonist, human protagonist, in the Transformers. He literally helped the Transformers for almost all of the comic books. I think Carly was his girlfriend in the comic books. But it went insane because somehow Optimus Prime transferred his conscious and his entire mental self into Sam, giving Sam these huge powers over psychic powers over Transformers, that he could take it apart. In order to save Sam's life, they needed to download Optimus out of Sam's head into a little floppy disk. And then they used the floppy disk to put it back into Optimus, the new version of Optimus Prime, which was literally the Power Master Optimus without the human that could turn into the machine. In the comic book, Spike did come down, but it was not until almost the ending to where the headmasters finally appeared. And the headmasters came, literally was the same story, but when the Headmaster Transformers arrived on Earth, they went to look for the Transformers here on Earth in the volcano. However, the volcano exploded, killing Galen, the leader of the Nebulons. So Galen gave his helmet that controlled Cerebros, that controlled Fortress Maximus, to Spike, which he just met, which just appeared in that issue of, or that comic book issue. So, the whole continuity of the Transformers in the comic book literally went insane. The first four made sense. Then after that, it kind of made sense. It followed the pattern, but it's like they started throwing stuff against the wall to see where it sticks. As far as the live-action movies go, can't wait for the new Rise of the Beast. Everybody is calling it Transformers 7. From what I hear, it's not. So, the original 6 movies of the Transformers was all one continuity. The Bayverse, Michael Bay's version. The new director took over from Bumblebee, which is supposed to be, they said, a prequel to those movies. However, it turns out it's a whole reboot of the series. So Rise of the Beast actually takes place, is the sequel to the Bumblebee. So it's basically the first Transformers movie. Uh, since we're on the subject, I am old school. Transformers G1. Loved it. The cartoon. Loved it. Kind of sad that the season 3 only was the short-lived mini series for Headmasters. That being said, I am also a anime fan, so the Headmasters, Master Force, Victory, Transformers were okay. They didn't really continue to continuity, but it's alright. It was Transformers anime. These all new series, not really a fan of. Certain ones are great. Prime was great. I liked Prime. I liked Armada, Energon, and whatnot. Robots in Disguise, I didn't like. Beast Wars was interesting, but my biggest problem with that is it's supposed to be Optimus Prime and Megatron. And for a while, I could think that maybe Transformers came to Earth a long time ago, and then went back to Cybertron, and then came back to Earth. No. They find the G1, Optimus, and Megatron buried in the volcano. So how can you have two Megatrons? I can imagine Optimus Prime and Optimus Primal being two separate characters. But there is only one Megatron. There was a Megatron before him. If you know the story, it's a Megatronus who actually was not part of the Primes, but was friends with the Fallen. The stories of the Transformers on Cybertron, if you can read the books, Exile, play the games, they're pretty spot on and pretty insane. It seems like they all follow a certain continuity of how Optimus was created, how Megatron was created, the stories. I think in the book, the Transformers books, it's weird because when the Autobots and Decepticons leave, before they get to Earth, they actually visit other colonies, and that's where Energon is supposed to be or come from. Where, they visit other Transformers colonies. And then they crash land on Earth. But Beast Wars is already here? Or like I said, it's so weird continuity when you start adding all these other things. GI Joe, live action movies, let's face it, it was entertaining. But what the F? GI Joe #1, it's livable. GI Joe 2, Retaliation, they brought in, well, they had Zartan. They brought in my other favorite character in Firefly. But they killed off almost all of the Joes, and then Roadblock becomes leader. But I will say, I screamed when they brought in Bruce Willis. To really, alright, for the, back to the G.I. Joe. For the Joe fans who don't realize who that was, they're not real Joe fans. So, the history of G.I. Joe is, if you go back, Hasbro created Barbie. Barbie did amazingly well. They decided to create Ken because they wanted to sell Ken to little boys, so little boys can play with little girls, play house. It didn't work. I mean, I honestly think if little boys were buying the toys, they might buy Ken. Or, you know, the little girls would buy Ken and the little boys would play with them. But you you gotta remember the society back then when you see little boys playing with dolls. Father figures, dads, whatnot, would be like, what the hell are you doing? You know, it was all about the way people think of you, your family. Today's aspect in society is who the hell cares? But back then, everybody seemed to care what everybody else's opinion of that person is. So Hasbro came up with this idea that if we can't sell Ken, but dolls are selling out for little girls, if we make a male version of the doll that oozed alpha, oozed machismo, oozed machoism, maybe they would sell. And the idea, I believe, we was headed into war, so the idea was to create these military dolls. And they did. And for each G.I. Joe that was sold, part of it went went to the war to make weapons and whatnot. So, you know, you see a little doll. It is a military doll, guns, whatnot, and buying it will support a war. A lot of people did buy it. Back then, the characters didn't have any names. I believe they had 5 characters. One was a Navy SEAL. The main character was an army guy. There was a pilot. I can't remember the next guy that made, maybe it was a Marine or a Ranger. I think it was a Ranger. And then the last guy was a medic. Now, the medics was actually the first black male doll that they created, military-wise, I believe. And this sold actually really well. But once the war finished, the dolls stopped selling. So, and the idea was, well, the name for the brand was GI Joe and the Action Force. And they always were questioning why was it GI Joe, and the whole idea was it's GI, which is, military, and Joe meant anybody could be in the military. So, and the dolls was literally anybody. You could think of yourself as the character in the doll. Well, almost towards the end of this whole GI Joe thing, they decided that they needed to name the doll. And they came up with a great character name. Joseph Cotten. I can't remember what he was, a sergeant or corporal. But as soon as they named the doll, the army guy, they had to name all the other dolls. And as soon as they finished doing that, the war ended, they stopped selling the dolls. So they decided to, in order to sell more dolls, they would take the dolls that they had for GI Joe, chop off the GI Joe name, and just call them Action Force, which is why GI Joe in other countries are called Action Force. So they created the series called Action Force. It was basically a survivalist series, so you still had guns, but now it was more, mountain climbing, hunting, surviving in a forest, rescue teams. Unfortunately, that never saved the toy company, so they stopped selling the figures after a while. The figures now are worth a lot of money. There are collectors that are trying to find them. So years go by, and they decided Transformers is doing really well. They got the entire idea from Japan. One of the, I guess, Hasbro reps went to Japan and saw Diaclone and decided they wanted to make a toy. Bring Diaclone to America and sell them. But they needed, some kind of conflict, so they created Autobots, they created Decepticons, they split up their own, factions. Well, they created the Transformers cartoon that was doing well. The cartoon was selling the toys. They decided to bring back GI Joe, but in a big way. They already had the idea of, we're going to create these 12 characters, we're going to create comic books, we're going to create a cartoon that will sell the toys. Well, I mean, they did create the cartoon, but it took some time. Uh, the comic book came out, I believe, uh, right after the toys came out, the first 12. Now, if you look into the comic book, the first original comic book, they tell you how the GI Joe team was created, and they actually have 13 members. One member was a female sniper that they kind of crossed out. They didn't think she'd work with the team. So the character that made the GI Joe team in the comic book was General Joseph Colton, the original GI Joe doll, which blew my mind. He knew he wanted team leader, who was Hawk, and from there Hawk created the team. Now you kind of learn early on with the comic book that Hawk chose certain people, but you don't learn until a good ways in who the first core team members were. So when Hawk was in the front lines, he learned of this group in the Vietnam War. 4 members. No name for the team, but these 4 literally had made a name for themselves. So 4 turned out to be Tommy, who later becomes Storm Shadow, the Ranger, Stalker, the Commando, Snake Eyes, and the Counterintelligence, Scarlet. So he wanted these 4 to start off the GI Joe. Unfortunately, Tommy disappeared, and we find out that he went after, well, he ran away after the Hardmaster was killed because the arrow that shot the Hardmaster and killed him was his, but we find out it's Zartan killed the Hardmaster, framing him. So he ran away and decided to try to find the killer. He joins Cobra and gets mind wiped and becomes Storm Shadow. The other 3 members leave the military, go their separate ways. Hawk finds Scarlet first, asks Scarlet to join. She declines. Snake Eyes is literally well hidden. Then nobody finds him because he doesn't want anything to do with people. So they go after Stalker. Stalker decides he'll join. Comes back. Hawk finds out where Snake Eyes is, asks him to join. He declines at first. But then he finds out Stalker is coming back, so he comes back. And then Scarlet shows up because in Vietnam, Snake Eyes was in a huge accident trying to save her. He literally lost his voice box, almost got his head cut off. His face was deformed and burnt. And Scarlet decided that if Snake Eyes was rejoining the military, she owed him the debt to come back and try and protect him. Later on, further down in the comics, we find out that it was Tommy, Storm Shadow, who anonymously sent Hawk a letter to tell him what Snake Eyes was. So the original 4 or 3 was those 3. And then Hawk found the other members to fit around them. And, Hawk becomes general. He brings in Duke. Now, here's the continuity that amazes me with GI Joe. The first black character is Stalker. The second black character they brought in was Doc, a medic. And if you remember my story from the very beginning of how GI Joe was created, there was a black medic. The original black medic is actually somehow related to the black medic from the second series or wave of GI Joe. They have the same last name. They haven't stated how they're related, but they've stated that they are related. And it throws me for a loop that they actually literally did this, that there is a continuity in G.I. Joe better than Transformers. And Bruce Willis's character in the movie is Joseph Cotten, the original G.I. Joe doll. I mean, I can get into this whole thing, but it's late. It's been almost an hour doing this video. I can talk to you guys literally about G.I. Joe and Transformers and all these other cartoons forever. I can tell you to go back and learn about the G.I. Joe comic books, the Transformers comic books, the original comics. It's literally hard. There are books you can find, and that, will give you a huge thing. You can probably learn more on eBay as well. Or not eBay, but the internet. Thinking about eBay and picking something up. But the storylines, the actual true storylines for a lot of the toys that we grew up with are insane. I mean, in today's cartoons, today's toys, they have a small storyline that, anybody can follow. But if you go back to our time and actually learn the details of these stories, so to share with you one extra story to show you how these stories are created. G.I. Joe, I think its 25th anniversary, a while back, created a very unique character, a specialist that was brought in named Matt Tracker. Now, a lot of you won't know the name. Some of you might. A lot of you that would know the name would be thinking, where have I heard that name before? If you've ever seen the cartoon Mask, Mobile Armored Strike Command, Matt was the leader of that group. In several comic books, they have GI Joe versus Transformers. So the Hasbro world of toys, of characters, are actually all in one universe. And that universe, Hasbro's universe, everything, G.I. Joe has its story, Transformers has its story, Mask has its story, Star Wars has its story. And each one of them is as complicated as Star Wars story. So I'm gonna say goodnight, because right now it's almost 10 at night here in Hawaii. Thank you for watching. If you're still watching, thank you. Thank you for listening to my on and on. But if you are a collector of certain things, if you are a fan of certain things, I urge you to go out, internet, books, whatever you can find, and find out the story of the product. The story of Transformers is amazing. If not only the story of the characters, but how they created, how Hasbro brought the story to America. The story of G.I. Joe, the characters and how they were created, is an amazing story. The story of He-Man and, well, not the character story. Well, the character story was amazing, but the backstory of the toys and the cartoons are amazing. The story of of Thundercats, their backstory, Silverhawks. For those who don't know, Thundercats and Silverhawks are technically in the same universe. Just eons, like years separate them, I guess. I don't know. But if they have a book for Thundercats, there is no pictures, it's all interviews and stuff. But they do talk about the creators for Thundercats created Silverhawks, and they talk about how they share the same universe. If you watch the new Thundercats cartoon, you saw Moonstar on it. I still don't understand what Third Earth is. Yeah, Thundera is another planet, but is that, the third Earth, or is that Earth the third from the sun? So wouldn't that be us? There's actually a great story to that, if you want to look that up. Marvel and DC comic books, graphic novels, the stories they have. There are multiple universe stories. Finding out about your loves and your passions is insane. I have more videos coming. Once the room is actually finished, we'll get to taking a look at everything. I do have more video game stuff coming. Hoping sometime this week to actually finally get out my review for Sniper Elite 4 and maybe the review for Saints Row next week. Also, once the room is done, if you've seen my videos on He-Man, the character book I have, and the toy book that I have more books that I will be sharing with you guys. Same thing that we've been talking about. So, be prepared. Stuff is coming. As soon as I get a lot of this is working again, you might also see more of the retro stuff for video games. I do have 2 more retro videos planned. A little surprise. Hopefully Hasbro Plus ships my shipment soon, so that's another thing. Stay tuned, guys. Again, thank you for watching. If you're subscribed, thank you for subscribing. If they're not, and you find all these videos great, why aren't you subscribed? Like I said, I'll see you guys soon. Maybe, hopefully planning to maybe go to 808 Collectibles tomorrow. We'll see. Have a good night, guys. See you.